our loved ones, old and young, and leaves us with another anniversary of lives cut short and a community forever changed. 3 weeks ago, 6 more people, including 3 children, were killed in a mass shooting at a school in Nashville. It was the 19th school shooting just this year. 3 weeks ago, 3 more families woke up without the child that they took to school the day before. 6 more families faced the unthinkable, that their son, their daughter, their parent, their husband, their wife, or their sibling are one of the 100 Americans we lose every day to gun violence. And Mr. Chairman, the United States is the only nation on the face of the earth which has these systematic mass shootings. And 3 weeks ago, the majority had planned to mark up this very legislation, a bill to make stabilizing braces widely available without a background check, even though they'd already been used in mass shootings in Dayton, Boulder, and Colorado Springs. When it was revealed that the shooter in Nashville also used a gun with a stabilizing brace, the Republicans canceled the markup. Until now. Today, the majority has decided that enough time has passed and 6 lives were lost in yet another mass shooting with a stabilizing brace. Perhaps they think that we have forgotten the lives lost in that terrible tragedy. But we will never forget them, or the countless others who lose their lives to gun violence every day. Today, rather than stand up against gun violence, the majority has called this markup so that they can yet again stand with the gun industry. Rather than support the law enforcement officers who are on the front lines of protecting our communities, the majority is attempting to weaken law enforcement by rolling back a rule created by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives meant to protect us from dangerous weapons. ATF is the law enforcement agency tasked with keeping guns out of the wrong hands and keeping our gun laws in line with congressional intent through rulemaking. In 1934, Congress passed the National Firearms Act, creating additional requirements to own certain especially dangerous firearms like short-barreled rifles, which were widely used by violent criminals. Congress included short-barreled rifles because they combine the firepower of a rifle with the concealability of a smaller gun. But in recent years, the gun industry discovered a way to circumvent the restrictions of the National Firearms Act by selling stabilizing braces, an accessory that allows a pistol to be fired from the shoulder, turning it into a deadly yet concealable short-barreled rifle. In 2020, under the Trump administration, the ATF concluded that stabilizing braces were being widely used to create short-barreled rifles and to publish guidance regarding their use. But House Republicans cried foul. Just 4 days after the guidance was published, 90 House Republicans sent a letter to ATF and DOJ expressing their opposition. And just a few days later, the guidance was withdrawn. A few months later, under the Biden administration, the ATF revived its efforts to regulate stabilizing braces and published the final rule in January to ensure that our laws stay in line with the intent of Congress dating all the way back to 1934, when Congress decided that deadly, concealable short-barreled rifles should be subject to heightened regulation. But Republicans will stop at nothing to block the ATF from taking this simple life-saving measure. Mass shooters used guns with stabilizing braces to kill 9 people outside a bar in Dayton in 2019, to kill 10 people, including a responding police officer, at a grocery store in Boulder in 2021, to kill 5 people in an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs in 2022, and to kill 6 people at a school in Nashville just 3 weeks ago. How many more people have to die before Republicans acknowledge that these weapons are a favorite of mass shooters for their ability to make a gun both deadly and concealable? How many more people have to die before Republicans will value the lives of our children over the profits of the gun industry? Last Congress, Democrats put forth a range of solutions to prevent gun violence, to support law enforcement, and to solve violent crimes. But our colleagues across the aisle continue to push for unfettered access to every firearm and accessory imaginable. As Republicans continue to seek freedom from gun regulation, we will continue to see communities free from gun violence. I urge my colleagues to oppose this dangerous legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank the gentleman. Who seeks gentleman from Kentucky is recognized. Mr. Massey.
How we support the ATF and enable it to do its job, but today again we're here to attack the ATF and to try to even abolish it. So, Director Dettelbach, I want to first say thank you for your service, and to the brave men and women who serve at ATF. I apologize for the manner in which you have been treated in this hearing, but I hope you understand they're not actually interested in having an answer from you. This is about making a speech and having a video clip and sending it to Fox or maybe raising money off it. So please don't feel badly that you're actually not being allowed to answer a question. So I'm going to actually ask questions, and I'd love your answers. I want to talk a little bit about how the ATF enforces laws that Congress passes and adapts to new technologies and innovations. Nearly 90 years ago, Congress passed the National Firearms Act of 1934, the first federal law regulating firearms in the United States. And as part of this law, Congress expressly regulated certain firearms and accessories because they were particularly dangerous. Americans were free to purchase them, but they had to undergo a background check, submit their photograph and fingerprints, and pay a $200 transfer fee. Today, we live in an age of 3D printers, automatic milling machines, plastics, and carbon fiber. Part of the National Firearms Act covers machine guns, guns that fire repeatedly with one pull of a trigger. We actually banned the civilian manufacture and sale of new machine guns in the 1980s, so there's only a finite amount of legal ones in the U.S. So, Director, my first question is, can you tell me what a Glock switch is?
Yes, a Glock switch Congressman, is a device that can be attached. It's usually a small piece of plastic or metal that can be attached to a pistol that changes it from a lawful semi-automatic weapon into a new and unlawful machine gun.
Into a fully automatic. So this is a device that can be attached to a legally purchased pistol, transforming the character of the gun, turning it into an illegal machine gun. Is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And you can get these for other types of guns too. For example, the AR-15.
There are machine gun conversion devices that go with a variety of different.
Okay, I'm trying to get through these quickly, so that's a yes. And the ATF regulates Glock switches in the same way as it regulates machine guns themselves. Isn't that correct?
Those devices are unlawful under the National Firearms Act.
So the answer is yes.
Yes, so they're
okay, and that's because within a few minutes' time, these devices, just a few ounces of metal or plastic, when added to a legally purchased gun, turn it into an illegal machine gun, correct?
That's correct.
And Director, the NFA also covers short barrel rifles, does it not?
Yes.
And the reason is pretty clear. Short barrel rifles can have the concealability and maneuverability of a pistol, but with the firepower and accuracy of a rifle. And with shoulder stock devices out there that now fold all the way down or telescope out, you can easily fit one inside a backpack or briefcase, and no one would be the wiser. So, Director, the ATF issued a rule on so-called stabilizing braces recently because it was clear that many of the items being manufactured and sold as stabilizing braces were really just being used to try to get around the National Firearms Act. Isn't that correct?
Whether a short-barreled rifle is sold in one piece or two pieces and you put them together, the rule was intended to cover what Congress defined as a short-barreled rifle.
So people are taking legally purchased pistols, adding these devices marketed as stabilizing braces, but which are actually shoulder stocks, and changing the character of the gun, transforming it into an unregistered short-barrel rifle. Is that correct?
If it meets the definition under the rule, then that would be correct.
So the ATF, in recognizing new technologies that are attempting and succeeding in working around the National Firearms Act, just like Glock switches, is appropriately regulating these things for what they are. My colleagues argued the other day that just a few ounces of plastic and metal can't transform a legal gun into an illegal one, but it sounds very much like you would disagree. Is that correct?
They're not illegal. Congress has determined that there are additional safeties and regulations that apply to certain kinds of particularly dangerous weapons.
Thank you.
And you can keep them. You just have to follow the rules that Congress has set up to follow those controls.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request. I ask unanimous consent that the drawing of the actual stabilizing braces, which was not what Mr. Massey held up, that was not, in fact, a regulated stabilizer. I'd ask this document, which is the actual diagram of an actual stabilizing brace that was prohibited by ATF, so the record is not only complete, but accurate, be submitted into the record.
So ordered.
Just glad.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't take very much time. I just, you know, as I said during my opening, I think this is an awful bill. That is just page after page of empty talking points with no real solutions. You know, instead of actually solving problems, this bill actually creates problems. I think it eviscerates our asylum process. And with respect to Chairman McCall, the asylum part of this bill comes out of the Judiciary Committee. And I don't know whether Mr. Castro wants to address that. I want the record to be clear what we're talking about here, what's in this bill.
Sure. Thank you, Ranking Member. And like, I know how much hard work Chairman McCall has done, for example, on getting Afghans, families that had relatives over there and helping evacuate them and being serious about policy and so forth. But this bill was in several titles and was the work of 3 committees. So when I was referring to the bill, I was referring specifically to the fact that Title II limits asylum and Title VII limits parole, both outside of what we did in foreign affairs. So that is something that has to be resolved, I think, with this piece of legislation, because perhaps there is some internal conflict among those titles.
Thank you. And as I said before, this bill won't stop drugs from getting into America because drugs like fentanyl are coming through legal points of entry, not via migrants seeking asylum. And again, I can't resist from pointing out that in the debt ceiling bill that my friends all voted for a couple of weeks ago, it would cut the CBP's budget by $4 billion. Weakening the ability to prevent drugs from crossing the border by laying off 2,400 officers. If this plan were enacted, there were estimates that more than 350,000 grams of fentanyl could be let into this country. That's over 200 million more fatal doses of fentanyl hitting our streets, thanks to these cuts that my friends voted for, if in fact they move forward. Half or more of the undocumented people are overstaying their visas, not crossing at the southern border. And this bill is quite simply a way, I think, for some to try to score political points, which I hear over and over and over again in some of the by demonizing immigrants. And I want to emphasize the point that Mr. Castro made, that language has consequences. And we see the impact of that language and those consequences every day, and it's quite frankly tragic, and it has to stop. But let me just get into just a couple of things that, during the markup of the bill, Democrats introduced an amendment allowing for Ukrainians to continue to be paroled into the United States until it is safe for them to go back. That's all it said. So if you're from Ukraine and your home has been destroyed thanks to Putin's war of aggression, you can stay until it's safe for you to go back. The Biden administration started a U for You program that helps save Ukrainian lives. And it seems to me my Republican friends want to undo this program. So we gave Republicans an opportunity to correct the mistake, to allow the administration to continue using parole for Ukrainians who are fleeing Putin's war crimes, and Republicans voted no. They voted to send them back into harm's way. And by the way, Ukrainians don't qualify for asylum because the restrictions are so narrow. So, Mr. Jordan, let me direct your attention to Section 701 of the bill, page 142, which reads in part, "The Secretary of Homeland Security may grant parole to any alien who is a national of the Republic of Cuba and is living in the Republic of Cuba." So, for some strange reason, you don't want to use parole for Ukrainians, but you do want to use them for Cubans, who are, according to this, are exempt from all restrictions that apply to every other nationality in the rest of the title. So it just seems kind of strange to me. Can you explain why?
We just kept the Cuban family reunification parole program in place. It's been a long-standing program, so we kept that in place. Anyone else from around the world, it's a the law is the law. It's a case-by-case basis, and the administration can use that on a case-by-case basis. That's what we have in the legislation.
So Afghanistan under the Taliban seems to be a worse life for people in Afghanistan than in Cuba. Why aren't they carved out for humanitarian parole?
Again,
or for that matter, why isn't the Afghan Adjustment Act included in this bill?
Again, we stuck with what the law is. The Cuban plan has been in place for a long time. We kept that in place. Others, the law says case-by-case basis. We went back to that.
Well, I mean, you're writing a law here. Why not add Venezuelans or Nicaraguans?
We had a long debate about that.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll debate it more. But you're telling me what's in the bill, and I'm just telling you why.
Yeah, sure. No, it just seems that this is an example kind of selective compassion. that, you know, makes one wonder why.
I would argue it's adherence to the rule of law.
Yeah,
That's what it is.
Well, you know, but
Biden administration not following it.
we're treating you know, one group of nationals very differently from others, from countries that, quite frankly, are experiencing far worse human rights abuse. Mr.
Is there further discussion on the resolution?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Dean is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you so much. You know, in a week marred by yet another tragic shooting or two or three, really a slaughter of our fellow citizens, my Republican colleagues are taking time to gesture instead of to act. The purpose of this markup is to show law enforcement, to acknowledge and give aid to those who we have entrusted with keeping our communities safe. My Republican colleagues haven't put forward anything to help police who are thrust into situations, perilous situations, facing down mass shooters with assault weapons, drug traffickers with weapons modified by stabilizing braces or bump stocks, or organized criminals with untraceable ghost guns. Let's do something about those things. No, instead, they want you to think they care this National Police Week. They've done barely anything to fund and equip our nation's law enforcement services. If the folks on the other side of the aisle actually supported law enforcement, they would pass and lead the House Democrats, who last year voted to pass. How about the Invest to Protect Act? Would have authorized $300 million in grants for law enforcement agencies with fewer than 125 officers. 55 Republicans voted against it. The Victim Act, which would have provided up to $100 million per year in grants to law enforcement agencies to help solve violent crimes. 178 Republicans voted against it. Or how about, remember when we passed the American Rescue Plan that delivers $350 billion across this nation to state, local, municipalities, and tribal areas. 219 Democrats voted for it. 210 Republicans voted against. How about the Capitol Police supplemental bill, funding the Capitol Police following the attack on January the 6th? Wouldn't that just speak for itself? 213 Democrats voted for it. 209 Republicans voted against supplemental funding to the Capitol Police. How about the assault weapons ban, which would take the weapons most used to target law enforcement and these mass murders that we are seeing, grotesquely blowing away our children? If you read the description of the most recent shooting, a person went over to help a little child who has been bent over almost prayer-like. When they lifted her up, she had no face as a result of an assault weapon. Do we want to do anything about that, or we just want to pass feel-good resolutions claiming we support the police? Instead, oh, by the way, the assault weapons ban, 208 Republicans voted against it. I guess they want to defend people blowing away our children, blowing off the face of a little girl. House Republicans have set their sights on defunding and abolishing federal law enforcement agencies. This is the hypocrisy. It's an oxymoron what we're participating here. Remember, Chairman Jordan has said he wants to use the power of the majority to cut funding for the DOJ and the FBI. Matt Gaetz, Mr. Gaetz, the gentleman from Florida, wants to abolish the ATF. You all heard that right in this very room. That's the agency that every police department in this country counts on and uses to track weapons used at crime scene. Abolish it, say some members of this committee. This is simply not the work of sincere folks, not of serious legislators. That's not showing care for our law enforcement communities, and it definitely isn't support for our law enforcement departments. And so, Mr. Chairman, with the remaining time I have, I say, please, I plead with all of you, take these issues seriously. Take the slaughter of the babies in our classrooms, in our shopping malls, in our synagogues, wherever it happens to be. take this seriously. Act. Don't pass feel-good resolutions that are absolutely hollow, vapid. We need action. My constituents are furious at the refusal of the Republican Party to take serious action on gun violence in this country. We cannot and we should not continue to live and die this way. It'll only be a matter of minutes before we hear of the next grotesquely gruesome slaughter of our citizens. And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Tiffany. Oh, Mr. Jordan.
I thank the chair. I would just do a quick response, and I'll be happy to yield to Mr. Tiffany, Mr. Chairman. An FBI that has a field office, the Richmond field office, which puts out a memo, and the memo says if you're a pro-life Catholic, you're an extremist, you're a radical, and we're going to look to put sources inside the parish, inside the church to spy on you. I do think we should evaluate how the American tax dollar going to that organization is being spent. That to me seems common sense. And we know that happened because a brave whistleblower came to this committee and said this was going on in Richmond. Now, to the FBI's credit, they rescinded that memorandum, what they call a domain perspective. But would they have done that but for that brave whistleblower coming forward and telling us that? When you got that kind of activity going on and a host of other things that this committee has uncovered, I do think you have to look at the appropriations process and make a decision there. Maybe some of the tax money going to this organization should be spent a little differently. That's what this committee has said. A number of us have said. We're not for taking it away from the rank and file, the good agents out there in the field doing good work, but we are for looking at things like that and saying maybe you shouldn't be getting all the money you're getting.
Will the gentleman yield?
No, I will not. Not till I finish.
The gentleman yield?
I will not. Not until I finish here. That's what we're concerned about. But you read that memo. You read that memo, and they were looking to put sources, develop informants inside the church if you're a pro-life, pro-family Catholic.
Will you yield
Think
now?
about that. That is frightening. And remember, this was signed off on by 5 people in the Richmond field office, including the chief divisional counsel. In other words, a lawyer signed off on it, a lawyer who supposedly went to law school and had a course on the Constitution and the First Amendment. And they signed off on it. And the Democrats say, keep giving the FBI money. We don't care that kind of activity. They rescinded that thing as quick as they could, but that was going on within the FBI. So heck yes, this committee should look at that. We have primary jurisdiction over the Justice Department, and we are doing that. We are doing that, but that is as wrong as it gets, as blatant a violation of First Amendment liberties. The first right in the First Amendment is your right to practice your faith, and the FBI was looking at putting sources in the church to snitch and spy on parishioners?
Mr. Chairman,
You've got to
will
be
you yield?
kidding me. Be happy to yield.
Thank you very much. So it seems to me that it is very clear you support defunding the FBI.
I didn't say that. I said we got to look at one of the things we do in this business in this Congress is you look at how you appropriate funds, and we will have recommendations going to the Appropriations Committee about how they should use the people I represent in the 4th District of Ohio, the numerous Catholics I represent in the 4th District of Ohio. They have a say in how their money is spent. We are certainly going to look at that. If you don't want to, if you just want to keep sending money to the FBI that's spying on people in church, go right ahead and take that position. The Republicans on this committee will not, and we're going to look at it. You may not want to, but we do. We do, and I guarantee, I bet you have Catholics in your district who want you to look at it. I know I do, and that's what we plan on doing. With that, I yield back to the chairman. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Amendment to H. Con. Res. 40, offered by Mr. Schiff of
Gentleman from Arizona reserves a point of order. Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentleman from California is recognized for his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The amendment is very simple. It inserts language expressing opposition to the Abolish the ATF Act of 2023, which would eliminate the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. Immediately after that bill's enactment, it expresses opposition to that bill as a dangerous effort to defund the police and harm local law enforcement. And just in case members are unfamiliar with what we would be abolishing under that legislation, the ATF's responsibilities include investigation and prevention of federal offenses involving the unlawful use, manufacture, and possession of firearms, and explosives. I was led to believe for many years that the Republican mantra was, we don't need any new gun laws, we should enforce the ones that we have. But apparently today they don't even want those laws enforced. More than that, the ATF also combats illegal trafficking of alcohol and tobacco. I guess my GOP friends don't think we should be doing that either. The ATF also operates a fire research laboratory where they examine ways of detecting criminal arson. I guess we want to abolish their ability to do that. ATF uses its legislative mandate to investigate and recommend prosecution of offenders to reduce the level of violent crime and hence public safety. I guess we want to abolish those efforts. ATF strives to increase state and local awareness of available federal prosecution under the statutes and works to curb the illegal use of firearms, enforce firearm laws. ATF issues firearms licenses. I guess we don't want to issue any firearms licenses anymore either. They also work on combating the import, manufacture, and dealing in explosive materials. So I guess we're going to abolish those efforts. As well as the special response teams, which are elite tactical groups that respond to high-risk law enforcement operations. So we don't want them to be able to do that in conjunction with local law enforcement. So that's what that bill would do, Mr. Gates' bill. It is, one of the clearest efforts to defund law enforcement. And given that this underlying bill is about expressing our opposition to efforts to defund law enforcement, I presume I'll have the support of my colleagues to express opposition to that effort. And I'm happy to yield to my Republican colleagues if they want to express support for Mr. Gates' efforts to defund the ATF. Would any of my Republican colleagues like to express their support for Mr. Gates' efforts to defund the ATF?
I think we're going to get to that.
I
think we're going to get to that,
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jordan, would you like me to yield to you, express your support for Mr. Gates' legislation to defund the ATF?
I'm going to yield to Mr. Gates.
No, I'm yielding to you, Mr. Jordan.
Well, I'm going to listen to Mr. Gates' compelling arguments that I know will be coming, and then we will have a debate.
Reclaiming my time, I'd be happy to yield to you for the purpose of yes.
I appreciate your willingness.
Mr. Jordan, if you let me finish.
I will.
It is my time. I'm happy to yield to you for the purpose of saying yes or no whether you support Mr. Gates' efforts to defund the ATF. Do you, Mr. Jordan?
I support Mr. Gates' effort to send a message to the ATF, which is what he said
so
just
you
a few minutes ago in the debate.
You support the legislation to defund the ATF?
I didn't say that. I said I support his efforts to send a message to the
The
ATF.
bill that Mr. Gates has introduced
changed the rule after 10 years of telling American citizens
that it would abolish, it would eliminate the Bureau immediately after enactment. Do you support that, Mr. Jordan? Yes or no?
I've given my answer.
Do you support it?
I've given my answer.
Yes or no, Mr. Jordan?
I've given my answer, Mr. Schiff.
Okay, I guess your answer is you don't support it, or you're afraid to say that you do. But I'm happy to yield to Mr. Johnson, or Mr. Biggs, or Mr. McClintock, Mr. Tiffany, Mr. Massey, anyone. Anyone else like to join Mr. Gates? And anyone like to express their support for Mr. Gates' effort to abolish an entire federal law enforcement agency? Anyone over there? Mr. Issa, do you support abolishing the ATF?
Thank you for yielding.
It's a yes or no, Mr.
You and I have served here for almost 22 plus years.
Reclaiming my time, I'm not getting a yes or no from anyone.
I was getting to that.
Well, yes or no.
I'm sorry, but
no, Mr. Issa.
What I was saying is
yes
that
or no.
It took 22 years to see you conducting a deposition of your colleagues, and I appreciate it, Mr. U.S. Attorney.
Reclaiming my time. Apparently, Mr. Gates is the only one willing to publicly say he supports defunding the ATF. Maybe that's progress, and I hope that will mean that my colleagues will accept.
I think there's going to be a vote. I think there's going to be a vote. You're going to know here in a couple of minutes.
I hope that my colleagues will accept the amendment.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Arizona.
Excuse me, I'm reclaiming my time, Mr.
You don't have any time to reclaim.
Well, I would if you hadn't been speaking over it.
No, you ask us all the questions.
Well, and what's the answer, Mr. Jordan?
The gentleman from Arizona.
What's the answer? Do you support abolishing the ATF, Mr. Jordan?
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate this interest in the legislation I've offered, and many of the features of government that are important that Mr. Schiff points out occur in other areas. They don't occur only in the ATF. Now, the ATF is an agency that has totally exceeded any sense of authorization. And by the way, it's not even an authorized entity of government. It just continues to get funded. And what have they done with that funding? Not according to me, but according to the Department of Justice's own Inspector General, they have failed to secure their facilities, and then they have violated people's civil liberties and rights by maintaining electronic records that they have no legal authority to maintain. Did they do that to just a few of them?
Will the gentleman
No,
yield?
hundreds of thousands of times they broke the law.
Mr. Gates,
and the
would you yield?
reason that that's problematic
Time
in a
belongs to the gentleman from
circumstance
Florida.
in
Mr.
which
Gates?
the ATF continues to grow beyond their limits is
Mr.
because
Gates, would
they
you
are
yield?
now imposing on, I'm defending my bill, Mr. Schiff, they are now imposing on regular Americans a sense of zero tolerance that isn't for public safety. They're putting people out of business, like those who are contacting each of our offices who have some Scrivener's error or technical violation that oftentimes isn't even the fault of the individual that the ATF is bringing hellfire down on from a regulatory sense. So yes, I do believe that the current structure of the ATF is absolutely not worth vindicating or funding or continuing in its operational setting.
In that case, would you yield, Mr. Gates?
I'll yield, Mr. Schiff.
Mr. Gates, can you identify any of your Republican colleagues on this committee who are supporting your bill?
Well, I can identify one, and then I'll get back to my remark. Mr. Biggs is a co-sponsor. I don't know if anybody else is. I'd invite your co-sponsorships.
Okay, so
frankly. There are people here supporting. Look, we're going to see in the vote.
Two
but the
Republican
important
members
thing is,
who favor abolishing the entire police
I can't
agency.
support that. I tell you what, you can get on the
Any other
legislative format.
takers?
I control the time. And you can get on and see that there's a handful of members who've co-sponsored the legislation. I would encourage everyone to do so because the ATF has been weaponized. And again, I repeat, this is not a partisan conclusion. The Department of Justice Inspector General was appointed by President Obama. He's an Obama appointee. And not only do they point out the high frequency at which the ATF violates the law, then they point out the recalcitrance of that agency to even follow the recommendations that have been set forth by the Inspector General. So sometimes when you get an agency that goes rogue, as the ATF has, it is the right time to start with a fresh sheet of paper. And that is not to say that every function of the ATF is a bad function of government. It is saying that this particular agency cannot meet those functions, and that's a position that's held not just by me, not just by my co-sponsors, some of whom, at least one of whom, is on this committee. It's something that, at least in the factual articulations of the deficiencies of the agency, is articulated by inspectors general. There's also a GAO report. There's also a GAO report that goes over records maintenance that excoriates the ATF. And that is also not a partisan entity. That is a nonpartisan entity that has a watchdog.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I'll yield.
If you acknowledge that there are multiple functions that the ATF currently performs that should not be abolished, wouldn't it have made sense to say in your bill, other than we're abolishing the ATF immediately, to provide some sort of transition for those functions to other agencies, to transition for the funding,
I would say
pending cases
I would say that
are in court?
is certainly something I'd be willing to work with you on. I'm open-minded as
I don't want to
the
get rid
transfer
of the
those
ATF,
functions.
so I'm not working
Well, that's
with
the
you on
problem,
that.
right? You don't want to get rid. Democrats, I'm sorry, I'll address the chair as we're entitled to do. My objective here with House Democrats is to try to build a system that adheres to the values that many House Democrats used to espouse regarding protecting individuals from too much government surveillance and too much government overreach. And the ATF has done that. That has been the conclusion of multiple entities that have observed their conduct. They haven't fixed the things that they were told wrong. And so, yes, I would start with a blank sheet of paper, and I don't think support for my measure in any way binds someone to the theory that these functions of government are not appropriate. But I do not trust the ATF to do those things. I really don't. I think that they're too busy going after law-abiding gun owners, and because I don't trust them to do the important things.
So you literally want to abolish, now earlier you said it was a shot across the bow. You literally want to abolish the agency in toto, immediately.
I would get rid of the funding we currently have through ATF for those functions, and I would reorient it where it does not go through ATF. And I would start that work tomorrow.
Gentleman's time has expired. Who seeks recognition? Question occurs on the amendment from the gentleman from California. All those in favor say yes.
Aye.
or aye. All those opposed say no. No. The opinion of the chair is the noes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that, I request record a vote.
Recorded vote is requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Issa? Mr. Buck? No. Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Gates? Mr. Gates votes no. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana? No. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs? Mr. McClintock? Mr. Tiffany?
No.
Mr. Tiffany votes no. Mr. Massey? Mr. Roy? Mr. Bishop? Ms. Sparts? Mr. Fitzgerald? Mr. Bentz? Mr. Klein? Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Gooden? Mr. Van Drew? No. Mr. Van Drew votes no. Mr. Nels? No. Mr. Nels votes no. Mr. Moore?
No.
Mr. Moore votes no. Mr. Kiley? Mr. Kiley votes no. Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman votes no. Ms. Moran? Ms. Lee? Mr. Hunt? Mr. Hunt votes no. Mr. Fry? Mr. Fry votes no. Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren? Ms. Jackson Lee? Mr. Cohen? Mr. Johnson of Georgia? Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes yes. Mr. Schiff?
Aye.
Mr. Schiff votes aye. Mr. Cicilline?
Aye.
Mr. Cicilline votes aye. Mr. Swalwell? Mr. Swalwell votes yes. Mr. Liu? Ms. Jayapal? Mr. Correa? Ms. Scanlon? Mr. Neguse? Ms. McBath?
Yes.
Ms. McBath votes yes. Ms. Dean? Ms. Escobar? Yes. Ms. Escobar votes yes. Ms. Ross? Aye. Ms. Ross votes aye. Ms. Bush? Mr. Ivy?
Aye.
Mr. Ivy votes aye. Mr. Issa, you're not recorded. Mr. Issa votes no.
Mr.
Chairman, how am I recorded?
Gentlelady from Texas.
Ms. Jackson Lee, you're not recorded.
I'll vote aye
Ms.
enthusiastically.
Jackson Lee votes aye.
Gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Ms. Dean, you're not recorded. Ms. Dean votes yes.
We good? Excuse me. Clerk will report.
Wait.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right.
Ms. Jayapal votes yes.
I know. I guess I'm checking. You okay? Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 12 ayes and 14 noes.
The amendment is not agreed. Amendment's not.
I yield to the chair. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I think you were going to indulge the Congresswoman from Florida and her point of inquiry.
The gentlelady from Florida is recognized.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my understanding that.
You're making a point of order?
No, I'm asking you a question.
Okay.
A point of inquiry.
Okay.
It's my understanding that the minority in this committee under the rules is entitled to the same testimony, information, documents that the majority is entitled to. So, I mean, I'm not aware that you're able to withhold information from the minority that we would need to use to prepare for.
When it comes to whistleblowers, you're not. And I would just remind the committee, remind everyone. Look, when it comes to whistleblowers, you are not.
That's not right.
It's shocking that the gentleman.
That is not right.
It's shocking that the gentleman.
You talk so much about the whistleblower and the impeachment.
It's shocking that the gentleman from New York would state that
we had
when you were part of an investigation with an anonymous whistleblower.
Mr. Chairman, these individuals haven't been declared whistleblowers.
I can't hear 5 people at once. Could we have regular order?
Mr. Chairman,
Chair recognizes it's.
I'm inquiring, and I was not.
And I've told you that when it comes to whistleblowers, you are not entitled to it. That's at the discretion of Mr. Allen.
Mr. Chairman, these individuals have been determined not to be whistleblowers. These are not whistleblowers. They've been determined by the agency not to be whistleblowers. Are you deciding that they're whistleblowers?
Yes, the law decides. Did you not listen to Mr. Levitt's testimony? Did you not read the law? The
His
law
attorney
decides
is
that they are
asserting-
whistleblowers.
his attorney
the
is
chair
asserting that
recognizes
they are
the gentlelady
whistleblowers.
from
The
New
law
York.
has not
The
determined
gentlelady
that
from
they
New
are
York has been
whistleblowers.
recognized.
The law has not determined they are whistleblowers. His attorney is just asserting that.
Gentlelady from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have lost my voice. I'm yielding to Mr. Gates.
I thank the gentlelady not only for
from California, Texas. Excuse me.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a point of order?
Mr. Chairman, may I be recognized?
Gentleman recognize Mr. Allen.
Yes, sir. I just want to make clear that what I wanted to avoid was the minority staff leaking portions of my transcript to the press without me having the opportunity to respond. Now that I'm here, I can respond and be judged in the court of public opinion. I have no objection to both sides having access to read the transcript, and I look forward to reviewing it myself.
Well, it's not of much help when you give it to us during the hearing. But I have a point of order, Mr. Chairman, if I may be recognized.
Gentleman's recognized for a point of order.
I point the chairman to Rule 10, Clause 9G, which in conjunction to Rule 11, Clause 2E, which I read earlier, states that each staff member appointed pursuant to a request by minority party members shall be accorded equitable treatment with respect to the accessibility of committee records. Now, the chairman is correct in pointing out that there are restrictions on whistleblower disclosures. However, those restrictions pertain to the House as a whole. They do not mention any distinction between the majority and the minority. Instead, what we have are two clear rules that require the majority to provide information to the minority that is committee property, which would be any meetings between the committee members or staff with any potential witnesses. So I would move for the chairman to agree to order that all materials, notes, and otherwise related to these witnesses before us be provided to the minority according to the rules of the House.
Overruled. Mr. Allen, we thank you for your willingness to make that.
I move for a recorded, I'd appeal the ruling of the chair.
I move to table.
I'd ask for a recorded vote.
Gentleman's asked, committee will suspend while we have the clerks. I think we have to have the clerks at the table to tally the vote.
Gentlemen, I'm afraid you're excused for a little while.
One second, if we could just step back. We'll have the clerk. Be real quick. The clerks will. We could probably let you just stay right there. The clerks. I need to lend one a microphone, and clerks will call the roll.
Mr. Jordan?
Yes.
Mr. Jordan votes yes. Mr. Issa?
Yes.
Mr. Issa votes yes. Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Massey votes yes. Mr. Stewart? Mr. Stewart votes yes. Ms. Stefanik? Mr. Gates?
Yes.
Mr. Gates votes yes. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes yes. Mr. Armstrong?
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong votes yes. Mr. Stubbe? Mr. Bishop?
Yes.
Mr. Bishop votes yes. Ms. Kamak? Ms. Hageman? Ms. Plaskett?
No.
Ms. Plaskett votes no. Mr. Lynch? Ms. Sanchez? Ms. Wasserman Schultz? Mr. Connolly? Mr. Garamendi? Mr. Garamendi votes no. Mr. Allred?
No.
Mr. Allred votes no. Ms. Garcia?
No.
Ms. Garcia votes no. Mr. Goldman?
No.
Mr. Goldman votes no.
Clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 8 ayes and 5 noes.
Motion to table is approved. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from...
Chris over here, who are trying to disparage you. It's disgusting. I thank you for your patriotic responsibility. Look, the free speech of parents is chilled. The speech and the duty of whistleblowers is chilled. We got a problem, folks, and we're trying to fix it. I'm out of time. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The committee will be in
Chairman, I
order.
have a
Members of the audience
parliamentary inquiry.
should refrain from any type of applause or anything.
The chair
Parliamentary
recognizes the gentleman from Virginia for a unanimous consent.
I thank the chair. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the interview of George Hill dated February 7th with the Judiciary Committee, in which he explicitly identifies Empower Oversight Mr. Jason Foster as his counsel, for the record. I thank the chair.
Without objection, the chair now recognizes Mr. Garamendi for his 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
We can do this all day. Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
Okay, let's do it all day. Mr. Chairman, I have a parliamentary inquiry.
And you're not recognized.
Mr. Chairman, there's a member in the side of the dais who has not been waived in on committee. Would like to know, is he asking to be waived in, or is he going to send the audience, or has he joined somebody's staff since he's against the wall?
Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, can I have an answer to my question, please?
He's a colleague. He's not been waived in. Mr. Garamendi is recognized.
Well, we'd be happy to waive him in if he wants to sit in, but he's up in the dais area, but he's not in the audience.
We waive him in.
Actually standing where, he's actually sitting where most times staff stands.
As is customary in the Congress.
Yeah.
Anything to obscure the facts, anything to stall the committee hearing. Unbelievable.
No, I'm not stalling. I think
Mr.
we need to follow
Garamendi,
procedures.
Mr. Garamendi is recognized for his 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that Mr. Garamendi's time be restored since it was taken by inappropriate behavior.
Gentleman is recognized. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from California, Ms. Sanchez.
Mr. Chair, just as a point of order, I understand and we have been made aware from what you stated in your opening statement, as well as in a press conference earlier, that Mr. Allen did meet with you all and might have testimony that was transcribed. Neither, and I understand that he stated that he did not feel comfortable meeting with the Democrats. He's comfortable being here today in this open forum. We will be questioning him. Will you give us a copy of that testimony that was transcribed of your discussions with him?
That'll be up to Mr. Allen.
But you are in possession of them, aren't you?
Sure are.
So why would you not give them to us?
Mr. Allen's a whistleblower and he didn't want that to happen.
He didn't want, but he's comfortable here in open discussion with us today?
Sure is. You can ask him questions if you want.
You don't share your information with the minority?
Nope.
No, so you're not sharing information that you've obtained with the minority staff.
Whistleblower saw what you did with Mr. Friend and others, the false information you gave the press, so much.
Sorry, I'm a bit late to the party. I've just realised that Jim Jordan is not particularly good or competent at the job that I think he's being paid to do. Now you may wonder, what is that job? No, it's not look for sound bites to appear on Fox News. It's not to carry the toilet paper and basically uses his tongue as the person that cleans up the mess coming out of Trump's backside passage. No, that is not Jim Jordan's job. It's not even to pretend he didn't see things that may or may not have happened around a wrestling room, changing room. No. Jim Jordan's sole purpose, actually, is not even to wear a yellow tie, blue shirt. Jim Jordan's sole purpose in life is basically to be a punchbag for the Dems. Because try again, he just fails. Just like happy slappy, Jim Jordan, slap, bish, bang, bang, wallop.
Allow you to continue investigation unencumbered. You said, we want to thank you and your office for permitting our inquiry to proceed independently without interference, as you assured the members of the Judiciary Committee would be the case during your confirmation hearings to become Attorney General of the United States. You value your special counsel status. So it is accurate that Attorney General Garland let you proceed on your case as you wish. Is that true?
That's true.
And yes or no, it was important to you that as a special counsel, your investigation was supposed to be independent. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Because special counsels and special attorneys are supposed to be independent, right?
Special counsel is.
Yes, and independent. They're supposed to be independent. Is that correct?
Special counsel is independent of the Attorney General's office.
Thank you. Why is that the case in your view?
So there can be some confidence on the part of people looking at the investigation that was done, decisions which were made.
Thank you. Special counsels and special attorneys are supposed to be, for the American public, to present the potential of a conflict of interest between the government and a sensitive investigation. By appointing a special counsel, an attorney general is supposed to be finding an unbiased party to do the investigating. This was at a very high level. This was dealing with potential presidential candidates. This was dealing with Russia collusion and undermining the very fabric of the United States of America. And they are supposed to leave that person alone, as you commended Attorney General Garland for doing. So, unlike Attorney General Garland, Attorney General Barr was very involved in your investigation, wasn't he?
He was not involved when I became special counsel. Prior to that, I worked under the supervision of the Attorney General and Deputy.
He was very
Attorney General's
involved, was he
office.
not? Let me just bring you to this point.
depends.
Barr established early on that he was very interested in your investigation. On June 8, 2018, he sent then Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein an unsolicited memo arguing that the Mueller investigation should not be able to force the president to submit to interrogation about obstruction. In his text message sending the memo, Barr wrote that he feels very deeply about some of the issues taking shape in the Mueller matter. How often did you meet with Attorney General Barr in 2019?
Before I was special counsel, maybe, well, with him himself, maybe every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something of that sort.
And then after?
Sometimes more frequently.
And then after?
After it became, I had been appointed special counsel, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that I saw him, but I didn't meet with him on
A lot.
the investigation. No, it was not a lot.
How often did you speak or text with the Attorney General? This is during the investigation.
I wouldn't, when I was special counsel or prior to that?
Special counsel, sir.
I don't know how many times I texted with him.
All right. Well, according to now public records, Barr scheduled at least 18 meetings or calls with you between 2019 March and October 2019. And you and he text messages with each other frequently, didn't you? Text messages.
Yeah, I was appointed as special counsel in October. So before that, yeah, there were probably any number of text messages. After that, I don't know.
Here are some examples. On August 31, 2019, he sent you a message that said, John strongly suggests that you, a lot of interesting things. On February 6, 2020, you text him, sir, just emerging from a skiff. Are you open to a call earlier this morning? On February 14, 2020, Barr texts you, call me when you get a chance. On March 19, 2020, Barr texts, can I call you later? And you responded, most certainly. On March 27, 2020, you sent him the best phone number for you, all during the time of being special counsel. And here's an interesting one. On September 24, 2019, the day that the Speaker Pelosi announced a formal impeachment inquiry into President Trump, Attorney General Barr texts you, call me ASAP, and later that day you text back. Do you have a minute for a quick call, Durham? What was the purpose of this call, Mr. Durham? Were you discussing the impeachment inquiry?
I never had any conversation with Attorney General Barr about the impeachment inquiry.
Mr. Durham, this is an awful lot of direct interactions with the Attorney General for imposed, supposedly independent counsel prosecutor. During these messages that sound to you like appropriate interactions, do they sound like appropriate interactions between an Attorney General and a prosecutor investigating the administration?
Sure. Before I was appointed special counsel, I worked for the Attorney General of the United States. That's who
But you
supervised
subsequently
me.
became special counsel. I know that. You
Right.
subsequently became. Not only did you interact with the Attorney General frequently, you also regularly engaged with one of his top deputies, Seth Ducharme. What was your relationship with Mr. Ducharme?
Seth Ducharme had been an assistant United States attorney in the Eastern District of New York. He works with one of my sons, we were friends, and he, at the time, was working in the Office of the Attorney General.
It seems that rather than having an
Time of the gentlelady has
independent
expired.
investigation,
Time
there
of
was
the
a lot of interaction between the
Time of
Attorney
the
General and the
gentlelady
special
has
prosecutor.